At our Thanksgiving party, the room was warm with candlelight and fake laughter until my grandma stood up and shouted, "Why is an elderly couple living in the $1 million vacation home I bought for you?" Forks froze midair. My dad's smile cracked. I couldn't even breathe, because I had no idea what she was talking about. I stared at her and whispered the only truth I had left. "What are you talking about? I'm homeless right now. The kind of homeless you don't post about. Sleeping on couches, counting quarters, pretending you're fine." Across the table, my sister went paper white like she'd just been caught in a lie she couldn't outrun. And then the front door opened. A man in a suit walked in carrying a thick briefcase. Our family dinner wasn't a dinner anymore. It was a courtroom, and I was the exhibit. My name is Zayden Cross, and I'm about to tell you how I lost everything while my own family lived like nothing was wrong. But before I do, I just want to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing one real person is listening is the only thing that keeps you steady. And if you've ever been the one blamed, ignored, or quietly crushed behind closed doors, please subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because the truth is ugly and I'm done carrying it alone. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. The Cross House in Indian Hill always looked like it belonged on a holiday card, the kind people mail out to prove their lives are stable and shiny. That night it was dressed to the teeth. Candlelight, polished silver, a long table that could have seated a small jury. My mother had the soundtrack of soft jazz floating through the rooms like a perfume. My father had his community smile on, wide, calm, harmless. My sister's laugh rose and fell at all the right moments like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror, and I sat off to the side, not at the head, not even near it, in a chair that felt borrowed, like the furniture itself knew I didn't belong here anymore. I kept my hands folded in my lap to hide the shaking. Not because I was scared of being caught doing something wrong, but because my body still hadn't adjusted to the humiliation of surviving. A week ago, I'd been standing in a leasing office in Hyde Park watching a woman slide my application back across the counter with the same polite pity you'd use on someone asking for spare change. "Your credit score isn't going to work for us," she said, as if I'd chosen it like a bad haircut. 2 days after that, my landlord taped a notice to my door. 3 days after that, my keys didn't work. My life didn't explode in one dramatic moment. It leaked out bill by bill, rejection by rejection, until there was nothing left but a duffel bag and the awkward kindness of friends who had their own lives. So when I say I was homeless, I don't mean the kind you picture on the evening news. I mean sleeping on couches and waking up before sunrise so you're not in the way. I mean brushing your teeth in a gas station bathroom because it's warmer than your car. I mean counting quarters for a coffee just so your hands don't freeze around the steering wheel. I mean being 30 years old and still showing up to a family holiday dinner like you're a functioning adult because your family cares more about optics than oxygen. I kept my face neutral. I kept my voice low. I laughed when everyone else laughed. I listened to relatives talk about interest rates and vacations and the market while my stomach clenched because the last thing I'd eaten that day was half a granola bar I found in my glove box. I told myself to get through the night, get through the turkey, the small talk, the fake warmth. Leave before anyone asked a question that would make me say out loud what my life had become. Then my grandmother walked in. Evelyn Cross didn't enter a room like a guest. She entered like a verdict. She was late, which meant everyone had been performing without her approval for an hour, and it showed. My mother's posture tightened instantly. My father's smile got a fraction too bright, too eager. My sister's face flickered just for a second, as if she'd been bracing for impact since sunrise. Grandma Evelyn had been overseas for years, living between airports and boardrooms, the kind of life that made people assume you're too busy to notice what's happening back home. But the first thing I felt when she stepped into the dining room wasn't "missed you," it was pressure. She scanned the table the way a person scans a contract, and when her eyes landed on me, they didn't soften the way I'd hoped they would. They sharpened. She didn't sit right away. She didn't accept my mother's fussing or my father's jokes. She stood behind her chair, hands resting lightly on the back of it, and the room fell into a quiet that wasn't respectful so much as afraid. "Zayden," she said. My name sounded different in her mouth, cleaner, colder, like it belonged to someone who still had a future. I looked up my fork suspended in midair with a piece of pumpkin pie I didn't deserve to be eating. "Mandy, answer me," she said, and then corrected herself without apology, like even her memory was irritated. "Zayden, answer me. Why is there an elderly couple I don't recognize living in the $1 million vacation home I bought for you?" The table froze so hard I heard it, not metaphorically. I mean the actual sound of fork clinking against a plate, a glass tapping a ring of crystal as someone's hand trembled. My father dropped his knife. It hit porcelain with a sharp hollow crack that seemed to echo through my chest. I stared at my grandmother as if she'd spoken in another language. A vacation home. $1 million, bought for me. I didn't own a vacation home. I didn't own anything but a beat-up car and a duffel bag that smelled like old laundry. The only property I had was the space I tried not to take up in other people's lives. What are you talking about?" My voice came out thin like I'd been punched. I looked around the table, searching faces for an explanation for someone to laugh and say it was a misunderstanding. "Grandma, I have no idea." Her gaze didn't waver. It moved slow and deliberate, sliding past me like I wasn't even the center of her attention. It landed on my sister. Brielle's wine glass shook so hard the surface rippled. Her cheeks went pale in a way makeup couldn't hide. She tried to smile, but the muscles didn't cooperate. And something in me, some instinct born from 3 years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too unstable, stood up inside my ribs and whispered, "She knows." I turned back to my grandmother, my mouth dry. The room felt too warm, too bright, like the chandelier was interrogating me. "I'm homeless right now," I said, because it was the only truth I had left. It came out before I could soften it, before I could make it polite. "I don't have a vacation home. I don't even have an apartment." Silence hit like a door slamming. Somewhere down the table, a cousin inhaled sharply. My mother's eyes widened, then narrowed like she was calculating how to recover the mood. My father's jaw tightened so hard the muscles jumped. "You're..." What my grandmother said, and for the first time something flashed across her face that looked like surprise. Not pity. Surprise. "I got kicked out last month," I said, and my throat burned as I forced the words through. "I've been crashing on couches. Sometimes I sleep in my car. I'm trying to fix it. I'm working. But I swallowed. I'm not okay." My mother moved first, because she always did. She reached for the narrative like it was a steering wheel. "Evelyn, honey, you just got back," she said, two brightly beads of sweat catching the light at her hairline. "Jet lag can mess with your sense of time. You probably went to the wrong address. There are so many lakeside houses in Georgia." Enough, my grandmother snapped, and the word cracked like a whip. My mother flinched. My father's smile collapsed completely. My sister made a small sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. "Logan." Her husband didn't look at me. He looked at Brielle first, like he needed her cue before he chose his face. My grandmother reached into her handbag. Her movements were calm, almost gentle, which made the tension worse. She pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table like a playing card. "This," she said, "is the house I purchased. And these," she tapped the photo once, "are the people who answered the door." I leaned forward without meaning to. My fingers touched glossy paper. A lake house filled the frame-wide wooden deck, tall windows, water behind it like a postcard. In front of the house stood Brielle Logan and an older couple I'd never met in person, smiling as if they'd won something. Brielle's arm was linked through Logan's. The older woman's hand rested on Brielle's shoulder like they were family. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up right there on the linen tablecloth. I knew that house, not because I'd ever been there, but because 3 years ago, when I was juggling shifts and skipping meals, Brielle had posted a photo with a caption that made my skin crawl even then. New chapter. New views. Everyone had commented hearts and congratulations. I'd scrolled past it at 2 a.m, exhausted, and told myself it wasn't my business. Brielle always had something new. Brielle always landed on her feet. Brielle was the kind of person our parents called capable. Now the picture sat in front of me like an accusation. That's my father, started voice thick. Mom, it's complicated. Today is Thanksgiving. We really shouldn't be talking about money, my grandmother cut in. No, George, we shouldn't be lying. My father's name, Bradley, was almost never used by her. She called him George when she wanted to remind him he was still a boy under her roof, no matter how expensive his suit was. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the floor. What does this mean? I demanded, and the room snapped toward me. If you bought a house for me, why didn't I know? Why am I living like this? Why is Brielle in that photo? Brielle's lips parted, but no words came out. Monica shot her a warning look. Logan's hand tightened around Brielle's forearm under the table. My father cleared his throat, trying to find his voice, trying to find the version of this story that didn't make him look like a thief in front of the whole family. Zayden, he said, and that tone, firm, parental, made something ugly rise in my chest. You're upset. I get it. But this isn't the place. This is exactly the place my grandmother said. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She took out her phone, pressed a contact without hesitation, and lifted it to her ear. Come in, she said. Right now. She didn't argue. She didn't lecture. She didn't negotiate. She just called someone like she'd already decided this dinner was going to end in consequences. A beat later, the doorbell rang. Every head turned toward the front of the house. The sound was too ordinary for the way it made the room feel like it was tilting. My mother stood up too fast, chair legs squealing. Evelyn, please, she hissed. Not in front of Sit, my grandmother said, and my mother sat pale and furious. Footsteps crossed the foyer. The door opened. A man stepped into the dining room wearing a dark suit and a controlled expression, carrying a thick briefcase like it weighed more than paper. He didn't look at the turkey. He didn't look at the guests. He looked at my grandmother, then at my father, like he already knew exactly who was guilty. Mrs. Cross, he said, voice professional and calm. I brought everything. My grandmother nodded once. Good, Malcolm. The lawyer set the briefcase on the table with a sound that felt final, heavy, certain. And in that moment, staring at that briefcase, I had one clear thought that cut through all my shock and shame. If this was just a misunderstanding, why did my family look like they were about to run? Attorney Malcolm Pierce didn't ask permission to take up space. He opened his briefcase right there between the gravy boat and the half-finished glasses of wine, and the contrast was almost insulting. Everyone had come dressed for a holiday performance, and he showed up dressed for war. Before anyone says anything else, he began, voice, even I'm here as legal counsel for Mrs. Evelyn Cross. This is not a casual family discussion. This is a formal clarification of facts and accountability. My father's face tightened. Accountability. He let out a forced laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Malcolm, come on. It's Thanksgiving. This is humiliating. You can't just march in here, and you invited people here. Malcolm replied, glancing around the table at the relatives and family friends who were now sitting perfectly still, eyes wide forks, abandoned. You created the audience. Mrs. Cross is simply refusing to let you hide behind it. My mother's nails dug into her napkin. Evelyn, she said, the sweetness gone, this is a family matter. We can handle it privately. You've had 3 years to handle it privately, my grandmother said. And there was no volume in her voice now, just wait. You handled it by isolating him and living off his name. I flinched at the word isolating because it landed too cleanly. It described my life better than any dramatic speech could. For years, I'd felt like I was screaming underwater, watching other people move through life like the glass wasn't there. My father pushed his chair back slightly as if he could physically distance himself from the accusation. Mom, I don't know what you think you saw in Georgia, but you will not leave this room. Malcolm said, not raising his voice, just stating it like a rule. No one is stepping away to make calls. No one is disappearing into the study. If you do, it will be documented as an attempt to interfere. My father stared at him, stunned. My mother's mouth tightened as if she hated that someone else was finally speaking in the tone she normally reserved for me. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking again. Part of me wanted to bolt, to run out into the night, get in my car, and vanish the way I'd had to vanish from everything else. But another part of me, the part that had been forced to survive on scraps of dignity, held still. If I ran, they'd use it. They'd turn it into proof that I was unstable, dramatic, ungrateful. The story would become theirs again. My grandmother's eyes met mine for a brief second, and something steadied in my chest. She wasn't here to rescue me with comfort. She was here to drag the truth into the light. Minimum evidence, she said to Malcolm. Now. Malcolm slid a thin folder out of his briefcase and laid it flat on the table. He didn't toss it like a threat. He placed it like an exhibit. This, he said, is a certified property record from the state of Georgia for a residence known in the filings as Lanier Ridge Retreat. My sister's breathing changed. Quick. Shallow. Like she was trying to hide panic behind her teeth. Malcolm continued. The purchaser of record is Mrs. Evelyn Cross. The property was originally titled in the name of Zayden Cross. My stomach lurched. Originally titled. The word hit like a trapdoor. And the current registered owner, Malcolm said, turning a page with deliberate slowness, is Betrayal Vaughn. For a moment, no one spoke. It wasn't the polite pause of dinner conversation. It was the silence of a room realizing the floor has disappeared. Betrayal didn't even try to talk her way out. Her body betrayed her before her mouth could. Her hands went stiff on the table. Her eyes fixed on the paper as if staring hard enough could erase her name. I felt heat crawl up my neck. A million thoughts piled into one. Rage, humiliation, the sick ache of being proven right about something I'd been too tired to articulate for years. I laughed once, small, sharp, involuntary. So it's real, I said, voice low, like I was afraid saying it louder would make it true. There was a house. In my name. And she owns it now. My father leaned forward, palms up, reaching for control. Zayden, listen. This is exactly why we didn't want to discuss it like this. It's complicated. There are details you don't understand. I understand one thing perfectly, I snapped, and my voice shook despite my effort to keep it steady. I've been sleeping on couches. I've been living out of my car. I've been counting change for gas. And all this time there was a house bought for me, and somehow my sister owns it. I turned to Betrayal. When did I sign it over? Because I don't remember that moment. I don't remember agreeing to give you anything. Betrayal's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her eyes flicked to my mother, then to my father, like she was searching for the line they'd rehearsed. My mother finally moved, stepping into the gap like she always did. Zayden, she said softly, and that softness had teeth. You're getting worked up. You need to calm down. This is why we've been careful. You've had a lot of emotional instability. There it was. The label. The old poison served in a clean glass. I stared at her. I could hear my own heartbeat, and underneath it I could hear the echo of a dozen moments where those same words had been used to shut me down. Whenever I asked why my life kept collapsing. Whenever I questioned why I couldn't get ahead. Whenever I dared to point out the obvious, that Betrayal always rose while I sank. I'm not unstable, I said, slow and clear. I'm angry. There's a difference. My father's voice sharpened. Don't talk to your mother like stop, my grandmother said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Sandra, don't use that word in my house. My mother stiffened. Evelyn, you don't understand what it's been like. What I understand, Evelyn said, is that I wrote to my grandson every single month. The sentence fell into the room like a stone dropped in deep water. I asked him if he liked the place, if he felt safe, if he needed anything. I never received one reply, not one thank you, not one message. Do you know what you told me, George? She looked at my father like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. You told me he was too unstable to write back. My breath caught. I turned toward her, disbelief and grief twisting together. You wrote to me, I asked, and my voice cracked on the last word. Yes, she said, and for a split second something like pain flashed across her face. Every month. I shook my head slowly, feeling the room tilt again. I never got them, I said. Not a single one. I didn't even know you were trying. The implication hung there, undeniable and ugly. If she mailed them and I never received them, then someone had intercepted them. Someone had decided that the easiest way to keep me powerless was to keep me alone. Malcolm's gaze cut toward my parents. For the record, he said all letters were addressed to this home in Indian Hill. My father's throat bobbed. We were holding them, he said, like it was a normal thing to admit. For him. Until he stabilized. Mom, you were traveling. We didn't want to burden you with the truth, my grandmother said. You didn't want me to know my grandson was being destroyed in my absence. My mother tried a different angle, quick and desperate. Evelyn, you don't know how hard we tried. He pushes people away. He disappears. He doesn't. I disappear because you leave me no place to stand, I said before I could stop myself. The words came out raw. You told me to be independent while you watched me fall. My sister's chair scraped as if she might stand, but Logan's hand pressed against her arms, silent and restraining. He still hadn't looked at me directly. He kept watching Betrayal the way a man watches a weather report trying to predict the storm. Malcolm flipped another page, calm as a machine. Now he said, since we've established the property's current ownership and the fact that communication was intercepted, we need to address the document that supposedly authorized the transfer. My father straightened. There is documentation, he said quickly, too quickly. Zayden agreed. He signed it. It was a gift. That's why it's in Betrayal's name. My stomach turned. A gift. Like my life was something they could wrap and hand off when it suited them. Malcolm held up a single sheet of paper in a clear sleeve. This is a gift transfer agreement, he said, recorded with a stated sale price of $1. $1. My lungs felt too small. He set the paper down between us. The signature at the bottom was my name. My handwriting, at least to anyone who didn't know me well. It looked familiar in the way a counterfeit bill looks real until you touch it. I never signed that, I said, and my voice was steady now. Not because I wasn't shaking inside, but because something in me had turned hard. I didn't gift anything. I didn't know the house existed. My mother's eyes narrowed, and for a second the mask slipped. Not worry, not sadness, annoyance. Like my refusal to play along was inconvenient. My grandmother leaned forward, her gaze pinning the paper like it was an insect. Then we're going to find out who did. Malcolm nodded once. Exactly, he said. He looked at my sister, then at my father, then at my mother, slow, deliberate, letting the fear build in the spaces. If Mr. Cross is telling the truth, then this document is fraudulent, which means someone forged his signature. And whoever did that didn't just steal a house. They stole his identity. Betrayal's lips parted, but all that came out was a thin, strangled sound. My father started to speak, but my mother cut him off with a sharp glance, and they both fell into the same panicked silence they'd been wearing since Grandma's first question. I sat there staring at my own name on a page I'd never signed, realizing something that chilled me more than the Ohio night outside. If they could intercept my grandmother's letters, if they could move $1 million property out from under me, if they could rewrite my life in ink and call it a gift, then I had to stop assuming I knew the worst of it. Because I didn't. And if they were willing to do this with a house, what else had they done with the rest of my life while I was too busy trying not to freeze in a parking lot? Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply took control of the room the way a surgeon takes control of an operating table. Calm hands, sharp eyes, no patience for noise. He slid the property record back into his folder, then looked at each of them. My father, my mother, my sister Logan. Like he was measuring how long it would take for the truth to crack through their teeth. We're going to keep this simple, he said. One question at a time. One answer at a time. No speeches, no moral lectures, we're verifying facts. My father let out a low scoff, but he didn't stand. He didn't storm off to the study. The audience factor mattered. My parents had spent their whole lives collecting the right people and the right impressions, and now those same people were sitting there watching my family's mask peel back in real time. The air felt tight, like the house itself was holding its breath. Malcolm turned to me first. Mr. Cross, he said, and hearing that title attached to my last name felt strange, almost painful. My father had always used my first name like a leash. Did you sign a gift transfer agreement conveying Lanier Ridge Retreat to Betrayal Vaughn at any time? No, I said immediately. My voice didn't wobble. The longer this went on, the steadier I became, not because I was calm, but because my body recognized something it hadn't had in years' structure. I never signed anything. I didn't even know the house existed. Malcolm nodded once and wrote it down. Then he faced my sister. "Ms. Vaughn," he said, "do you claim this signature is Mr. Cross's?" Brielle's throat moved like she swallowed something sharp. "Yes," she said too quickly. He agreed. He was overwhelmed back then. He told us he didn't want. "Stop," Malcolm said, not harsh, just final. Details. Date, time, location. Who was present? Brielle blinked. Her eyes flicked toward my mother like a child looking for the right answer on a test. "Brielle?" My mother murmured a warning disguised as support. Malcolm didn't look away from my sister. "Ms. Vaughn," he repeated, "date, time, location. Who was present?" "I don't remember," Brielle said, and a flush crept up her neck. "It was years ago." "I don't remember the exact—" "You remember enough to claim ownership of $1 million property," Malcolm said, "but not enough to remember where the transfer happened." My father finally tried to reclaim the room with indignation. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't interrogate my daughter like she's a criminal in front of family." I stared at him, and something hot and old rose in my chest. He said daughter with that protective tone he never used for me. For me it was always, "Son, be a man, handle it, don't embarrass us." For Brielle it was always, "She's trying, she's sensitive, she didn't mean it that way." Evelyn didn't even glance at him. She kept her eyes on my sister. "Answer," she said. Brielle's mouth tightened. Logan's hand drifted toward her knee under the table. A quiet signal, not comfort so much as coordination. He was watching her like he was watching a live wire. Malcolm closed his pen and set it down. "All right," he said. "Since the direct route isn't working, we'll go through the timeline. Mr. Cross, you mentioned you're currently without stable housing. Let's address why. Because the condition you're in is relevant to motive." My mother's head snapped up. "That has nothing to do with it, has everything to do with it," Malcolm said. "A person who is financially stable, housed, and employed has more power to question documents, dispute records, and pursue legal action. A person who is exhausted, isolated, and struggling to survive has less. If someone benefited from Mr. Cross being powerless, then how he became powerless matters." My father's jaw clenched. My sister stared down at her plate as if the cranberry sauce could save her. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want my cousins and my parents' friends hearing the ugliest parts of my life. But I'd already said the word homeless out loud, and there was no unsaying it. The shame had already escaped. What I had left was the truth. I took a breath and let my eyes drift not to them, but past them toward the window, where the dark yard stretched out like a quiet ocean. "It didn't happen all at once," I said. "It happened like a slow collapse. And the weird part is, it always collapsed the same way. Every time I got close to stable, something yanked the floor out. A memory hit me so sharply I tasted it. The smell of cheap carpet and lemon cleaner. The leasing office in Cincinnati. The woman behind the counter pretending not to judge me while she judged me anyway. I could see her manicured finger tapping the edge of my application. I tried to rent a one-bedroom in Hyde Park, I said, and my voice stayed level, but my hands tightened under the table. I had pay stubs. I had references. I had money for the deposit. She ran my credit and slid the paper back like it was contaminated. She said, "Your score isn't going to work for us." I asked her why. She said there were late payments, delinquencies. I told her that didn't make sense because I was paying my student loans every month. My mother exhaled a sound that might have been annoyance, might have been contempt. "You've always been disorganized with—" "No," I cut in, and even I was surprised by the steel in my voice. "That's what you always said. That was your favorite explanation. You said if I was struggling, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough, because I was careless, because I was unstable." The word hung between us, and for a second I saw my mother's mouth tighten the way it did when she realized I'd learned the pattern. "I wasn't careless," I continued. "I was obsessive. I tracked every dollar. I skipped meals so I could make payments. I worked nights and weekends. and still the loans were marked late. Malcolm leaned forward slightly. "Do you have records of those payments?" he asked. "I thought I didn't," I said, "because I was drowning and I didn't have the energy to fight paperwork. But I have bank statements. I can pull them up. The payments left my account. That's what made it so confusing." Money went out, but the lender kept saying it didn't arrive. Evelyn's fingers curled around the stem of her wine glass. She didn't drink. She just held it like it was something she could crush. The room felt warmer, and I realized it was because my anger was finally doing something useful. It was keeping me upright. It wasn't just housing, I said. It was work too. I graduated top of my class. I made it to final interviews. I had professors vouching for me. I should have been fine. But every time I got close, the offer disappeared. Another memory rose bright and cruel. Chicago. The cold wind cutting through my coat. The lobby of a glass building. A recruiter's smile. A handshake. A confident, "We'll be in touch soon." Then the email the next day that didn't match anything that happened in that interview. "I flew to Chicago for a final round," I said. They were excited. They talked salary. They talked start date. They joked like I was already part of the team. Then the next morning I got a call saying they were going in another direction. No explanation. Nothing. Just a door slamming. My father shifted in his chair and I felt the old urge to apologize for making him uncomfortable. I didn't. I kept going. "One HR guy," I said, "let something slip." He didn't mean to. He said, "We received an email that raised concerns." I asked him what concerns. He wouldn't show me, but he said it was about my mental health, that I was unstable, that I was a risk. My mother's eyes flickered. My father's face went still in a way that wasn't innocence. It was calculation. Malcolm didn't look surprised. He simply asked, "Do you still have any correspondence from that process?" A forwarded snippet, a subject line, anything I almost said. No. That was my default now, to assume I had nothing, to assume I didn't deserve proof. But then I remembered something I'd buried because it hurt too much to stare at. "I have an old inbox," I said slowly. "I used to forward everything to myself when I was job hunting just so I wouldn't lose track. There was a weird forwarded message once. It didn't include the whole email, just a line. I ignored it because I was exhausted and ashamed." My throat tightened. It said something like, "We can't move forward due to concerns regarding your stability and prior conduct." It was around the same time everything started falling apart. Malcolm's eyes stayed on mine. "If you can access that inbox," he said, "that's important. The language, the timing, the pattern. It becomes part of a broader picture." My mother leaned in, voice slick with a kind of false concern that made my skin crawl. "Zayden, you're spiraling," she said. "You're connecting dots that aren't there. You always do this when you're stressed." There it was again. The script. Reduce my reality to a mood swing. Turn evidence into emotion. Make me the problem so no one has to look at what they did. Evelyn's voice cut across the table like a blade. "Sandra," she said, "you will not speak to him that way in front of me." My mother's cheeks flared. "Evelyn, you don't know what it's like living with him. He's unpredictable. He disappears for days. I disappear," I said, and my voice shook for the first time, not from fear, but from the rawness of it. "Because every time I asked for help, you told me I was weak. Every time I questioned why I couldn't get ahead, you told me it was my fault. And every time I got close to stability, something tore it away." I saw Maya's living room in my mind, the way her couch sagged in the middle, the way I'd slept with my shoes lined up neatly by the door so I could leave before her kids woke up. I saw my car in a parking lot, breath fogging the windows, my phone lighting up with a message that made me feel like my chest was cracking. "I can't renew. I'm sorry. You have to be out by Friday." I started to think I was cursed, I admitted. Or broken, or just not built for life. But now I'm sitting here hearing there was a house bought for me and that it ended up in Brielle's name, and suddenly my life doesn't look like bad luck anymore. It looks like a plan. My father's eyes snapped to mine. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "It's a serious life," I replied. "And it got destroyed." Malcolm placed his hands on the table, anchoring the moment. "Mrs. Cross," he said to Evelyn, "you mentioned earlier that you were told Mr. Cross was mentally unstable and unable to manage assets." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said. "George and Sandra told me that, repeatedly. They said Zayden couldn't handle a large sum of money or property. They said until he became independent they would act on his behalf." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Independent. That was the word they used on me like a weapon. Be independent, Zayden. Don't ask, don't rely, don't embarrass us. And while I was scrambling to prove I didn't need them, they were using my name to hold what was mine. "So that's what this was," I said quietly. "You needed me weak. You needed me struggling. Because if I was stable, I'd ask questions. If I had a decent job and a real address, I'd check records. If I had credit, I'd hire a lawyer." My mother's hands trembled, but her eyes stayed hard. "You're making yourself into a victim," she said. I didn't have to make myself anything I said. I lived it. Malcolm opened his folder again, but he didn't pull out new papers yet. He looked at my sister. "Ms. Vaughn," he said, "you claim Mr. Cross agreed to gift you the property. Yet you cannot describe when, where, or how. And Mr. Cross asserts he never signed anything. Your parents assert he was unstable and needed guardianship. That combination creates a clear incentive for someone else to act in his name." Brielle's lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. Malcolm finally spoke the line that made my spine tighten. "We've also received preliminary findings on the transfer document itself," he said. "Not just the signature. The document shows indicators that it may have been created later than the date printed on it." My father's face drained just a shade. My mother's eyes darted fast and sharp. I stared at the paper with my forged signature and felt a strange, sick clarity. If they could falsify a date, then they could falsify the whole story. Not just the transfer, not just the house. Everything they'd told me about who I was and why I was failing. I leaned back in my chair, the candlelight blurring for a second. "If you faked the timing," I said, my voice low, "then you didn't just steal a house. You rewrote history." Malcolm's gaze held steady. "That's what we're going to prove," he said. And I understood then with a cold certainty that this dinner wasn't ending with an apology. It was ending with a file number. We moved from the dining room into my father's living room, not because anyone wanted comfort, but because Malcolm needed a flat surface, better lighting, and fewer distractions. My father's house was built for hosting for presentation white sofas. Nobody sat on framed photos that looked more like advertisements than memories, a fireplace that never carried the smell of real smoke. Even the air felt staged. Relatives lingered at the edges, unsure whether they were allowed to leave, afraid to be the first to stand up. My father hated that. He hated witnesses. He hated losing control of who heard what. I could see it in the way his shoulders stayed tight, in the way his eyes kept flicking toward the hallway that led to his study, as if he was calculating how to get us in there and shut the door. Malcolm didn't let him. He set his briefcase on the coffee table, clicked it open, and looked straight at Brielle. "Ms. Vaughn," he said, "I need the original gift transfer document you rely on. Not a photo, not a copy you printed tonight. The original." Brielle's breath hitched. "It is the original," she said, already defensive. "Then produce it," Malcolm replied. My mother leaned in toward Brielle, whispering something I couldn't hear, but I saw the urgency in her lips, the silent command to keep it together. My sister's hands shook as she reached into her purse. For a second, it looked like she might refuse, might claim she didn't have it, might try to run the clock out. But the room was full of eyes, and my grandmother's stare didn't blink. Brielle pulled out a clear sleeve with the paper inside, like she'd been carrying it around as an insurance policy. She held it up with a trembling sort of pride. "There," she said. "Look, date, signature, everything." My name sat at the bottom in ink that wasn't mine. A wave of nausea hit me, the same kind I'd felt standing in that leasing office hearing I didn't qualify to rent a place to sleep. Back then, it felt like the world had decided I wasn't worth stability. Now I was staring at proof that stability had been taken from me and handed away like a party favor. Malcolm took the paper without reacting. He didn't grimace, he didn't gasp. He treated it like a routine object, which was somehow worse for them. He laid it flat on the table and pulled out his tablet. "We're going to verify this in a specific order," he said. "Physical characteristics first, then ink, then printing artifacts, then handwriting." My father scoffed, trying to make it sound ridiculous. "Printing artifacts," he repeated like it was a joke. "You're going to tell me a printer knows when someone signed a paper?" Malcolm didn't look up. "I'm going to tell you that paper and ink tell stories people don't expect," he said. He took a photo of the document, zoomed in, and turned the screen toward all of us. The signature filled the display, enlarged so much the strokes looked like highways. Then he zoomed beyond the signature into the blank areas most people never consider. The fibers of the paper became visible. The ink became texture. And then, faint as dust, tiny specks appeared, minute dots in a pattern I would have never noticed with my naked eye. Betrayal frowned. "What is that?" Malcolm's finger hovered over the screen. "Many color laser printers embed microscopic tracking marks," he said. "It's not visible at normal size, but it's there. Those marks can identify the printer and in many cases the date and time the page was printed." My father's expression shifted, the confident irritation thinning into something else. My mother went still, so still it looked like she'd stopped breathing. Malcolm tapped again, pulling up a reference image beside it, explaining just enough for the room to understand without drowning us in jargon. Then he said the sentence that made my ears ring. "This document was printed approximately 6 months ago." The silence that followed felt heavier than any shout. I stared at the tablet screen, then at the paper, then at my sister's face, as if I expected her features to rearrange into honesty. 6 months, I repeated, my voice quiet, almost disbelieving. "But the date on that says 3 years. Betrayal's eyes widened. That doesn't mean anything," she said, rushing. "Maybe we reprinted it. Maybe the original got damaged. Maybe my father jumped in fast, too fast." "Exactly," he said. "We probably made a copy. That's normal. People lose things. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Malcolm finally looked up at him. "If it's a copy," he said, "then there should be a trail. Email correspondence. A scan saved on a computer dated 3 years ago. A file history. Any evidence that the document existed in that form at that time. If this was legitimately executed, there would be something besides your word." My father's mouth opened, closed. He looked toward my mother for backup. My mother attempted calm. "We're not organized like that," she said. "We don't keep you keep $1 million house." I said, the bitterness cutting through. "But you don't keep proof of how it changed hands." Evelyn's voice was low and lethal. "Sandra," she said, "stop insulting my intelligence." Malcolm turned the tablet back toward the document. "That's one layer," he said. "Now the signature." He pulled out another folder and slid a single-page report onto the table. I saw lines, percentages, language that looked clinical. He didn't read every word. He didn't need to. He pointed to the conclusion. "The signature does not match Mr. Cross's known handwriting patterns," Malcolm said. "It shows strong similarity to Ms. Vaughn's handwriting characteristics." Betrayal's face drained again, the way it had at the dining table when my grandmother first asked her question. Only now there was nowhere for her eyes to run. She stared at the report like it was a sentence carved in stone. "That's insane," she whispered, but it didn't sound like denial. It sounded like panic. My mother's voice turned sharp. "You can't prove that," she snapped. Malcolm's tone didn't change. "It's already proven," he said. "We have exemplars. We have analysis. And we now have a printing timeline that contradicts the stated date." I felt a strange kind of grief wash through me, not for them, but for myself. For every time I'd questioned my own memory. For every time I'd been told I was the problem. I'd been living inside a story they wrote about me, and the ink was literally their ink. I looked at the paper again, at the forged version of my name, and it hit me like a bruise. My identity had been used as a tool against me. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure. "Why 6 months?" I asked, and the question came out like a blade. I turned my eyes from Betrayal to my parents. If you were going to do this, why not do it 3 years ago? Why wait until 6 months ago to print it? My father's gaze dropped for the first time, not in shame, but in calculation. My mother's fingers curled knuckles white. Evelyn answered before they could. Because 6 months ago she said I told you my work overseas was stabilizing. I said I might return home sooner. I said I wanted to check on my investments. My stomach tightened as the pieces clicked together with a sick precision. They hadn't been careful for 3 years because they'd believed she wasn't coming back. They'd been living on borrowed time. And the moment they heard footsteps approaching, they scrambled to build a paper wall. So you panicked, I said softly. You realized if Grandma came home and looked at the records, everything would collapse. So you made a document that didn't exist. You backdated it. You gave yourselves something to point at when she asked questions. Brielle's eyes filled, but not with remorse, with fear. My father tried to stand. This is turning into a witch hunt, he said, voice rising. You're all ganging up, sit down, Evelyn said, and my father sat. The room watched it happen, watched a grown man obey his mother, because he had no better move. Malcolm didn't stop. He looked toward Logan for the first time with direct focus. Mr. Vaughn, he said, you and your family have been using the lake house as if it belonged to Ms. Vaughn. How did you come to that understanding? Logan's posture stiffened. He glanced at Brielle before he answered, just a flick of his eyes, but it was enough. It was the kind of reflex you develop when your story depends on someone else's cues. I didn't handle the paperwork, Logan said. Brielle did. We were told it was hers. By whom, Malcolm asked. Logan's mouth tightened. By Brielle, he admitted, then quickly added, and her parents. They said Zayden didn't want it. That he was going through things. My mother's lips parted in outrage. My father's eyes flashed, warning him to stop talking. But Logan had already said enough to confirm what I'd felt from the start. He'd been watching Brielle like a script supervisor, because he knew the truth mattered, and he knew their version was fragile. Malcolm closed the folder with a quiet snap. All right, he said. At this stage, the transfer document is not credible. The printing timeline conflicts with the stated date. The signature analysis indicates it was not executed by Mr. Cross. And the surrounding circumstances strongly suggest it was prepared in anticipation of Mrs. Cross's return. Brielle's shoulders sagged. My father stared at the rug like he could disappear into it. My mother's breathing turned shallow, fast. I sat back, feeling the weight of it, feeling the strange reversal of power. For years, my life had been defined by unanswered questions and invisible barriers. Tonight, the barriers were showing seams. Malcolm's eyes met mine, steady and sober. This is the paper layer, he said. The next layer is financial. And based on what we've already seen, the paper was only meant to cover what actually sustained this for 3 years. I swallowed, my mouth dry. If they were willing to forge my signature and invent a timeline, then whatever they'd done with my money, whatever they'd done to keep me trapped, was going to be uglier than I'd let myself imagine. And as the room sat in that heavy silence, I realized something else, something that made my skin prickle. They weren't afraid of being disliked. They weren't even afraid of being exposed to the relatives watching from the corners. They were afraid of receipts. Malcolm's voice was a calm current, steady, even as it sliced beneath the surface of everything my family had built their reputations on. We've discussed the forged property documents, he said, placing a thick folder onto the kitchen island, its weight a blunt instrument. But none of that explains why Mr. Cross, the intended owner, didn't just challenge the transfer. It's not hard to contest if you have resources, stability, and a place to stand. So let's talk about how you made sure he had none of those. The relatives who hadn't quietly slipped out stood in the doorway, arms folded, glancing at their watches, as if searching for a reason to excuse themselves from witnessing a train wreck. My father's jaw worked side to side. My mother pressed her lips together and started twisting her ring. My sister looked at the marble shoulders folded in eyes darting. Malcolm opened the file and laid out a series of bank statements, each one highlighting the same outgoing payment from my account. A payment I remembered making every single month, thinking it was going to chip away at my student loans. Let's start with these, Malcolm said. Every month, Mr. Cross deposited a payment listed as a loan repayment. He did this without fail. Yet the lender's records don't reflect a single payment received in the last 3 years. The room was silent except for the hum of the fridge. Malcolm pulled out another set of documents, this time color-coded transfers between accounts. Instead, he continued these funds were rerouted to a secondary account under the name Monica Cross, sometimes directly, sometimes through an intermediary account that links to the household utilities. I stared at the papers, numbness rolling up my chest. Every night I'd come home from my second job too tired to stand in the shower, logging into my bank app to check that payment. Every time I ate rice and eggs for a week to make sure I didn't miss it. Every time I believed I was working my way out of the hole. All I'd been doing was feeding the hand that kept me there. Malcolm's voice didn't waver. There is no family fund here. These are direct diversions. The dates, the reference codes, the IP addresses, each one lines up with a login from this very house. My mother found her voice pitching it high and wounded. I set those up to help him to make sure he didn't forget. It was a safety net. He's always been so overwhelmed, and it wasn't a safety net, Malcolm said. It was a snare. Mr. Cross paid thinking he was freeing himself, but you ensured the loans would be marked delinquent. His credit dropped, his rental applications were denied. His job prospects shrank. You cut every avenue of escape. I felt the shame, burning memories tumbling out of order me at a bank counter, hands sweating as a clerk told me my card had been declined. Me in Hyde Park, the leasing manager, shaking her head with that look of practiced sympathy. Me on my phone in a parking lot, seeing another rejection email that didn't match the conversation I'd had with a recruiter just the week before. Let's make it clear, Malcolm pressed, the decline in his credit score was engineered. The moment payments stopped registering with the lender, your son was red flagged. When his lease ended, he couldn't find a new place. The timing aligns exactly with the account diversions. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. My father made a gesture of exasperation, like he was being accused of bad taste, not a crime. Malcolm moved on, his gaze steely. That alone would be sufficient to argue civil fraud. But there's more. We have emails anonymous sent to HR departments at firms where Mr. Cross interviewed. The emails describe him as unstable, unreliable, and a risk due to mental health episodes. My heart hammered, a slow rage building. The old pain of thinking every job was slipping away because of something inherently wrong with me now gave way to a new, colder fury. You sent those, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Malcolm nodded. Our digital forensics found the source. They were sent from the home network here in Indian Hill multiple times from a device registered to Bradley Cross. My father bristled, all pretense of dignity gone. Anyone could have accessed our Wi-Fi, he snapped. Neighbors, guests. You can't pin that on me. Malcolm didn't flinch. The emails used language and phrases that match your own documented business correspondence. We have timestamps that show you were present at home during every transmission. There are also unique device identifiers. No guest used your laptop. We'll hand this to the prosecutor. I watched the realization settle in, the first inkling of panic cracking my father's careful facade. My sister seemed to shrink further into her seat, her nails digging into her palm. Malcolm continued undeterred. Now about the house itself. Ms. Vaughn, you claimed the lake house was simply a vacation home that you let your in-laws stay for free. Brielle lifted her chin, defiant. They're family. It's better than leaving it empty. Malcolm laid out another document, a neat table of monthly bank transfers. But there are recurring payments, $5,000 each month from Harold and Judith Vaughn's joint account into yours, labeled as rent. That's not generosity, that's profit. You stole the house and turned it into a cash machine. Evelyn's voice cut in, cold and precise. You didn't just steal from your brother. You monetized his misery. You built your comfort on his desperation. Brielle's jaw trembled, her bravado suddenly brittle. I felt the weight of it, all the endless nights working, the mornings spent standing outside interview rooms with a tie borrowed from a friend, the months rationing groceries to make rent crashing down. I wasn't unlucky. I was sabotaged. But Malcolm wasn't done. Finally, we found additional financial activity tied to your identity, Zayden. Lines of credit, new utility bills, even a registration fee for a service you never used. all opened at the lake house address, all damaging your credit score. Every single one was set up or maintained by either your parents or Betrayal. It all fit a cruel architecture, ruin my credit, block my housing, smear me at work, then use my identity to cement their claim. The goal was never just to take the house. The goal was to make sure I could never claw my way back. I felt sick, angry, and strangely clear. You never had to take everything I said. You just had to make sure I could never stand up again. My mother gave a thin, desperate laugh. We did what we had to. For the family. For Betrayal. You were always difficult, Zayden. We just managed things for you. My father added, "We were protecting you from yourself." Malcolm set his pen down, his tone final. You protected yourselves. Everything you did was about consolidating power and wealth, not about Zayden's well-being. The room was electric, the pressure of years of lies and gaslighting exposed. I saw my parents' eyes darting, calculating, and realized they were about to pivot to deploy the only defense they had left, paint me as dangerous, unbalanced, someone who couldn't be trusted. I caught Malcolm's eye as he leaned closer to Evelyn, voice barely above a whisper, but I heard every word. They'll try to flip this. They might call the police or manufacture a crisis. We need to get ahead of it. He was right. I could feel it, the same dread I used to feel as a kid when the adults closed the doors, lowered their voices, and decided what my story would be. But this time I was ready for the door to stay open. The temperature in the house seemed to drop as my father stood abruptly. He raised his voice loud enough for the remaining guests to hear. "I think it's time for everyone to head home," he declared, that old imperious note returning to his words. "This is a private family matter now." Relatives exchanged nervous glances, not sure whether to obey or stay torn between curiosity and discomfort. Some slipped out quietly, but a few remained too invested, too shocked, or simply unable to leave the scene. Bradley fixed his eyes on me, the same eyes that used to pin me to the wall as a kid. "Zayden, come to my study. We need to talk, just us, man to man." I saw the move for what it was: divide and conquer, get me away from Malcolm and Evelyn, isolate me so he could regain control. Erase witnesses, rewrite the story behind a closed door. I shook my head. "No, Dad. Anything you have to say, you can say here." His lips thinned into a line. He gestured at Malcolm's briefcase. "Give me those papers. You have no right to keep my family's business hostage." Malcolm calmly placed a hand over the files. "This is evidence. Any attempt to tamper with or remove documents will be treated as obstruction." For a moment I saw the old rage flare in my father's face, but there was something else there too, a flicker of fear. Suddenly Monica lunged for her purse, pulling out her phone. She began dialing with trembling hands, raising her voice. "He's threatening us," she screamed, eyes wild, pointing at me. "He's out of control. He's violent. He needs help." The script was being played out. Turn the narrative, make me the aggressor, play the victim to the authorities, invoke mental instability so my words could be dismissed. But Evelyn was ready. She stood every inch the matriarch and said clearly, "Go ahead. We've been expecting this." Then looking directly at Malcolm, she nodded. Malcolm responded, voice ringing out. The entire conversation since my arrival has been recorded, audio and video, with timestamps. Every statement, every action, every attempt to disrupt or destroy evidence is preserved. If law enforcement needs to review, we welcome it. Monica's phone slipped in her grip. Bradley's face twisted with a kind of desperate fury. Betrayal began whispering frantically to Logan, fingers flying across her phone as she sent texts, probably to someone outside. Maybe a cousin or a friend. Maybe telling them to remove something to hide a document. Logan tried to pull her toward the hallway, muttering that they should just leave. But Betrayal jerked free, voice shrill. "This is your fault. You said it would be fine if we just backdated it. You promised," my father snapped at her. "You never keep your mouth shut, do you? Always with the drama." Malcolm's calm didn't waver. "I suggest nobody leave. The authorities will want everyone present. Any attempt to interfere with evidence, any attempt to destroy or hide anything further, will be included in my official statement." The chaos hit its peak just as the doorbell rang again, this time with an authority that silenced everyone. A set of firm, measured knocks. Monica moved to the foyer, intent on intercepting to set the story her way. But Malcolm was faster, stepping forward, legal badge in hand. He opened the door to reveal two uniformed sheriff's deputies, their faces professionally unreadable. Monica launched into her act. "Officers, thank God you're here. My son, he's having an episode. He's unstable. He's threatening the family." Malcolm intervened. "Officers, my name is Malcolm Pierce. I represent Evelyn Cross and Zayden Cross in a pending civil and criminal matter. There is evidence of identity theft, forgery, financial fraud, and attempts to tamper with evidence. I have all relevant documents, video and audio from this evening. I request immediate preservation of the scene and witness statements." The lead deputy raised his hand, pausing Monica's performance. "Ma'am, please remain here." "Sir, we'll need to review the evidence. No one leaves until we've taken statements." Suddenly, my mother's voice faltered. My father, silent for the first time all night, glanced at the deputies, weighing his options. Brielle's tears finally broke through. She tried to slip away, but a deputy gently blocked her path. I stood rooted in the kitchen, realizing for the first time that I wasn't the one under threat. For the first time, their script didn't work. I wasn't the scapegoat, the black sheep, or the mentally unstable son to be shuffled off and silenced. As the deputies began collecting statements and Malcolm handed over evidence, I watched my parents' empire of image crumble. Relatives hovered now, witnesses unable to rewrite what they'd just seen and heard. I caught Malcolm's eye. He spoke quietly to the deputies, but I heard every word. "There's one last step pending the probate documents and restitution claims. There's ample evidence for criminal referral. This isn't just a family dispute. It's a pattern of exploitation and financial abuse." I looked at my family, still trying to salvage the story, still clinging to the roles they'd written for themselves. But it was over. The Thanksgiving night they tried to bury me, as the family failure became the night they locked the cuffs on their own wrists. And for the first time, the house in Indian Hill felt like a place where the truth was louder than any lie. The police presence in the living room shifted the dynamic instantly. Their calm, methodical authority silenced the last pockets of denial and made every lie heavy. One deputy asked everyone to remain seated and keep their phones away. The scene was clinical: relatives on the edge of their seats, my parents glancing at each other for silent cues, Brielle fidgeting with her sleeve, Logan visibly uncomfortable as the officers recorded names and initial statements. I watched the officers' pens moving, taking notes on everything from who dialed 911 to whether anyone felt threatened or injured. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being quietly led away or shushed in the hallway. I was the one at the center, but not under siege. I could see the guests and even the house staff watching, registering the shift. The Cross family wasn't untouchable tonight. As Monica tried again to revive her old refrain, insisting with wide, frightened eyes that I was unpredictable, escalating, and potentially dangerous, I calmly spoke directly to the lead officer. "Officer, I have not threatened anyone here. This is a legal mediation with my attorney present, with all evidence and discussion recorded since the moment Malcolm arrived. My family has used that accusation against me for years to avoid facing their actions. Tonight, everything has been documented for the record." My voice was measured and clear. It was the same tone I'd practiced in job interviews, trying to seem steady even when I was exhausted and desperate. But now, it was real. I wasn't desperate, I was in control. It was then I admitted publicly for all present to hear that I'd intentionally played the role of the broken, overwhelmed son at the start of dinner. I needed them to let their guard down. If I'd come in ready for war, none of this would have come out. I let them believe I was still trapped. But I knew what I was doing. My relatives, my parents' friends, and even the officers looked at me differently. It was the reversal I'd wanted for years. They could no longer label me unstable. My calm was the evidence, and my family's panic was the real warning sign. Brielle was the first to crack. As one officer started a separate line of questioning about her role with the lake house and the rental payments, she burst out, voice ragged. "You all keep blaming me, but Dad said if I just backdated the signature, nobody would ever check. And Harold and Judith pay rent because, well, someone has to cover the costs. Her words trailed off, realizing too late that every syllable was being recorded. Her hand clamped over her mouth as the deputy asked her to repeat her statement for clarity, reading her Miranda rights, as Malcolm requested that her admissions be entered as evidence. I felt a cold, distant satisfaction. I didn't need to raise my voice, accuse, or beg anyone to believe me. My sister and my parents were doing it all themselves, unraveling years of gaslighting with a few careless confessions. Malcolm stayed professional, but I caught the slight nod he gave me, a recognition that the plan had worked. "Officer, please review these property transfer records," he said, sliding forward the certified copies of the deed history, the forensic handwriting analysis, and the microdot printing report. "You'll also find records of rent payments into Ms. Vaughn's account from her in-laws, Harold and Judith, totaling $5,000 per month over 3 years. These are proceeds from an asset fraudulently acquired." One deputy began to process the physical evidence, while another started asking for detailed statements about who handled correspondence for my grandmother over the last 3 years, who accessed my financial records, and who sent anonymous emails to my former employers. Logan tried to feign ignorance, but when pressed about the regular payments from his parents and the house's ownership, he faltered. "I mean, I knew they paid Betrayal every month for something, but I always thought it was legit. I didn't ask a lot of questions." His voice was weak. He never signed documents, never made the big decisions. He just collected the benefits and kept quiet, which the officers noted as they recorded his answers. Amid the mounting admissions, Evelyn stood and addressed the officers and assembled witnesses. "Before we go any further, I want it formally recognized that as of tonight, under advisement and witness of counsel, I have completed and executed a new will and estate plan. Copies are here for your records, and my attorney Malcolm Pierce is prepared to submit them as required. Bradley Cross, Monica Cross, Betrayal Vaughn, and Logan Vaughn are all disinherited from my estate and from all property claims effective immediately. My grandson Zayden Cross is my sole heir and is authorized to pursue recovery and restitution of any assets wrongfully held or transferred." Her voice was clear, cold, and final. Malcolm confirmed, "This has been reviewed, signed, and notarized. Officers, you have copies. Any attempt by the aforementioned parties to interfere with asset recovery should be considered obstruction." The impact was immediate and devastating. My father's hands trembled. My mother began to cry, at first quietly, then louder as the reality settled in. Betrayal screamed at Evelyn, at Malcolm, at me, demanding to know how we could do this to our own blood. Logan just shook his head, as if finally realizing there was nothing left for him to control or gain. I watched all of it with a strange, remote calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply asked the officers to ensure that every question was answered truthfully, that every statement was included in the record, and that nobody left until the evidence was secure. I wasn't interested in revenge or spectacle. I just wanted the truth acknowledged for the first time in years. As Bradley tried to beg, promising to change, to make it right, to explain everything, Monica joined in, pleading, her voice hoarse from crying. Betrayal dissolved into rage and denial. I stayed silent, letting their words echo back at them, knowing there was nothing left for me to say that evidence wouldn't already prove. The moment wasn't about winning, it was about ending the story they'd tried to write for me. I caught Evelyn's eye, and she smiled a small, tired smile that said she understood justice was never about restoring the old order, but about severing the cycle. Malcolm spoke with the officers, laying out next steps: requests for subpoenas on digital devices, orders to secure the home's network, warrants for expanded bank records. The police nodded, accepting his recommendations. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a crime scene. For the first time, I didn't need to ask, will anyone believe me? Now the only question left was, how far will accountability go? The days that followed were a whirlwind, a sharp, dizzying shift from years of paralyzing uncertainty to the machinery of justice grinding forward, unstoppable. Within 72 hours, Malcolm delivered formal legal notice to Betrayal and her in-laws, requiring them to vacate Lanier Ridge Retreat. With sheriff's deputies and locksmiths in attendance, the locks were changed, inventories were taken, and my home, the place I'd only ever seen in photographs, was returned to me. I stood at the threshold, key in hand, trembling as I entered. The rooms echoed with the ghosts of what might have been lost nights spent sleeping in my car, 3 years of rationed meals. Interviews failed not by my merit, but by their malice. It was both victory and mourning. Harold and Judith, blindsided, tried to claim innocence. Brielle told us the house was hers fair and square. We just paid what she asked. But the paper trail was clear, thousands a month for rent funds that supported her lifestyle, and made them at best willfully blind to the fraud. They became witnesses in the investigation, caught in the web, but not its architects. As the investigation deepened, officers seized computers, retrieved records from banks and ISPs, and gathered statements from relatives and household staff. Malcolm and his team painstakingly mapped the full scope of the fraud emails routed through the Indian Hill home network accounts opened using my name and address, cash flows redirected away from my loans and into Monica's secret account, even subtle manipulations of my employment and rental history. For every night I doubted my sanity, there was now a digital receipt. It wasn't instant justice, never is. Over months, as the case wound its way through the legal system, I rebuilt my life room by room. I stayed at Lanier Ridge Retreat, at first afraid it would all be snatched away, waking in the middle of the night, half believing I was still homeless. But each day made it more real. I fixed broken fixtures, repainted walls, let the light in. I built a home office, launched a remote consultancy using my story as a warning and a blueprint for others, whose families weaponized money and trust against them. Brielle faced charges for forgery, fraud, and grand larceny. Her confession, recorded, signed, and witnessed, made the case airtight. She tried to claim coercion, ignorance, anything to lessen the blow. But the facts were relentless. She was convicted, her marriage collapsed, her reputation in ruins. Logan, never as clever as he thought, tried to play dumb, but was still forced into restitution. His family's assets scrutinized for their part in the scheme. Bradley and Monica, stripped of all credibility, watched as their social circle evaporated. Former friends refusing their calls, distant relatives severing ties. Their names became synonymous with disgrace. Professionally, Bradley lost clients. Monica found herself shunned at every charity luncheon, and neither would ever be trusted in a business context again. Through it all, Evelyn was my rock. We sat on the porch most Sundays talking about everything except the trial, learning to become family again. She said little about the inheritance, but everything she did was an act of trust, letting me handle repairs, draw up plans, even take over the finances she'd once guarded so tightly. By the time the civil claims were settled, I'd won full restitution for lost rent damages, for emotional distress, and the return of every cent that had been siphoned from my accounts. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to love me. I just needed my life back. 1 year after that Thanksgiving, I stood on the deck of Lanier Ridge Retreat, coffee in hand, the early morning sun scattering across the water. The house was quiet, peaceful, a symbol not just of a battle won, but of something built. I no longer worked 3 jobs. I managed my own business, helping others navigate the maze of financial abuse and family manipulation, teaching them what it took me years to learn: you only survive if you refuse to let them write your story. I rebuilt my credit, my friendships, and slowly my faith in people. I never let myself forget what happened, but I also didn't let it define me. The wounds became wisdom, the house became a home, and my grandmother became my closest ally. In the end, what I reclaimed was never just a house. It was my right to be believed to be safe, to make my own choices. Family, I learned, is not the people who share your blood. It's the people who don't turn you into a prop for their ambitions. What was stolen from me wasn't just money or shelter. It was 3 years of dignity, trust, and self-worth. Getting it back wasn't a gift, and it wasn't revenge. It was justice. And now every morning when the sun rises over Lanier Ridge, I know that I am the author of the rest of my story. The ending is mine to write.